Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar. As we let people jump on, please feel free to answer the poll that should have been popped up on your screen. As a reminder, we are recording this webinar, so please note that. And if you don't agree to those terms, please feel free to sign off. We will give everybody just another minute before we get going. Hello and welcome to our Voices for Healthy Kids Advocacy Training Series. My name is Annie Semitis. I'm the instructional designer for Voices for Healthy Kids. We've got a quick poll going right now, so if you want to quickly fill that out before we end it and share the results. We're excited to see who's all here and what you know about the Power Prism. A couple of housekeeping things to go over before we launch into today's content and presenters. We are recording this webinar and it will be available after for playback, and so we'll make sure we get that out to you. We also will be taking questions in the chat function during this presentation, so please feel free, I'll be monitoring that personally, to put in all of your questions into that chat function. We'll make sure we get them to both Lori and Rena as we present on. There'll be a section at the end for questions, specifically for some questions and discussion too, but all lines will be muted until then. Please feel free to, or please fill out the evaluation we have at the end of this. As we're building our training series, we really do take your feedback into consideration. We want to build some really great content for you moving forward. And then lastly, I just want to make a plug for what's coming up in our advocacy training series. We've got 2 great digital advocacy sessions coming up in later this month and then early July. So learning all about digital advocacy and some email results, or email best practices for email rather. So that an invitation for that will be going out shortly. We hope to see you at those trainings. Now I'd like to turn things over to your presenters today. Lori Frazina, the Vice President Executive Director of Voices for Healthy Kids, and Rena Singh, who is the Campaign Planning and Communications Director.
Thanks, Annie. So it's great to be here with all of you today. Please also be sure to throw in the chat box if for some reason there's a tech issue and you can't see or hear us. You and Annie will help us solve those. As Annie said, I'm Rena Singh. I'm the Director of Campaign Planning and Communications here at Voices for Healthy Kids. I'm excited to be here with all of you. I am also here to say that I am not only here to talk to you about the Power Prism as a trainer, I am someone who has been trained and used it throughout much of my advocacy career. So I also love being able to share it with other folks and share this opportunity with Lori, who taught me all about it many moons ago. Our objectives for today is we're going to give you a pretty high-level overview of the Prism, but we're hoping that this will help you understand how to use the tool to move through your advocacy campaigns, but also move your missions forward. As Annie said, we're going to be having a lot more of these training sessions going through the rest of the summer and into the fall, and so we'll also use those opportunities to walk through each power tool more in depth. And as part of our conversation today, we'll also talk about how our team at Voices uses the Power Prism somewhat as our theory of change. It's how we approach our work and our planning and even our organizational structure. And so we'll share some of that with you so you can see the different ways of which we use it in our work. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lori to introduce herself and get us going.
Thanks, Rena. I'm Lori Frasino, the Executive Director of Voices for Healthy Kids, and I helped co-create the Power Prism back in 2002. So this is probably my very favorite thing to talk about, and I'm going to get cut off if I go too
Lori,
long. So
I hate to interrupt.
Sure.
But we're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me, Rena, talk for 1 second. I'm going to headset, so that might work. Hold on.
Okay. So I'll just get started and Lori can catch up. So real quick, we wanted to answer the what is advocacy? So advocacy is the application of pressure and influence on people and institutions that have the power to give you what you want. And the Power Prism allows you to bring together all these tools to help you do that. Now I'm going to try to kick it back to Lori and see if that worked.
That was very smooth. How's that?
Thank
Is that
you.
better sound quality?
Yeah,
See?
much better.
I've had these before. Thanks, Rena. I appreciate it. Thank you, Annie. I have intermittent connection sometimes. So a couple of level setting things just to get started here. The basic definition of advocacy is worth noting because as we've done our work and as Voices for Healthy Kids has expanded and has so many new partners and grantees and folks who have done change work around the country, it's occurred to us that sometimes we use language interchangeably. And so very simply, when we are talking about advocacy and the Power Prism and at Voices, all it is the application of pressure and influence on the institutions and people that have the power to give you what you want. So sometimes we work with grassroots volunteers and advocacy sounds like daunting and political and like President Trump would be involved. But we use this image of this child with a puppy here to remind all of us that we are born advocates. When that kid in your household, or maybe when you were a child yourself, wanted a pet, they know instinctively, intuitively, and through their own experience, which adult in that household is going to react to what kind of pressure points. So it could be negative pressure, it could be positive pressure, it could be promises, anything. And they usually know that if there's more than one adult in the household, those adults are going to require different touches because of what motivates those people and how they take action. That's all advocacy is really thinking about those people we want something from and how it is we're going to get them to give us what we want. So if you go to the next slide here, Yui, one of the things that I think most of us learn from and hopefully are able to share with others is the mistakes we make along the way. And so if I had thought about the 3 key questions 25 years ago or whenever it was when I got to start doing public health advocacy, we probably would have had a lot more wins along the way. The 3 key questions are critically important, and it's almost like we should write them on our wall as our daily affirmation. And if you remember nothing else from this presentation, remember the 3 key questions, because we literally are asking ourselves these all the time because the answers change. The 3 key questions, if you want to go to the next slide and show them, are very simple. What do you want? Why do you want it? And who has the power to give it to you? So I'm going to give you an example. What do you want? We have been doing work in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia to protect Philadelphia's local sugary beverage tax from statewide preemption, from basically having the state of Philadelphia saying, or the Commonwealth, that you can't have this local tax, Philadelphia, and no other city or town in Pennsylvania can do the same thing. We've been fighting and a valiant effort with all sorts of folks in Pennsylvania to keep that into place. Why do we want it? Well, we know that beverage taxes, and we have data now from a couple parts of the country, can actually reduce consumption of sugary drinks. We know sugary drinks are incredibly harmful to health on all sorts of fronts, whether it's oral health or diabetes or cardiovascular health or obesity. We also know that the investments that were made in Philadelphia with that beverage tax have been invested in things that we would consider equity-centered investments. So early care and education and rebuild, which is parks and playgrounds and sort of play spaces and activity spaces in the city that make it more possible for people to get out and enjoy themselves and be physically active and be healthier. Who has the power to give it to us, though, is something that we usually, when we get to this question, we get really different answers from the audience, and we'll ask you to each think about the answers to your own 3 key questions. Sometimes people will say, well, Mayor Kenny, the mayor of Philadelphia, he's got the power to give it to us. Or some people will say, the people, they have the power to give it to us. Or people might, come up with big business or whatever. And while all of those things are fabulous and valuable, in truth, there's a very small handful of people in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that have the power to give us what we want and to keep preemption away. The governor, Governor Wolf, and probably 2 or 3 or maybe up to 5 members of the state legislature that act as guards and blockers to what passes and what doesn't. And so what we need to do when we're trying to get what we want for Pennsylvania, we need to focus our energy on those small subset of people. And it changes. And you know that it could be your city council president, it could be your mayor, it could be a committee chair, it could be your committee chair's best friend, committee chair's enemy if they're all getting along. It's very, the universe of places where we need to put our pressure and influence is so much smaller. And I say that this is a mistake that I have made throughout my career, because when I started this work back, I was with the American Cancer Society 100 years ago, and I was their grassroots person. I spent all of my time serving my volunteers. And so if I had volunteers, and I live in Massachusetts, and I did in Western Mass, who like loved this, they were so into, wanting to do grassroots, and I spent all my time out in Western Mass. The Senate president was from Chelsea, which is right outside of Boston on the eastern part of the state. Western Mass was led by members of the Democratic Party who loved everything we were doing when it came to tobacco control and everything else. I did not need to be spending my time in Amherst with these volunteers. I needed to be finding volunteers in Chelsea to be influencing the Senate president. But I didn't really understand at that point that that was my job. And once I started understanding these 3 key questions and found tactful ways to tell my Amherst volunteers that I needed to be in Chelsea, the job changed, and we were able to really accelerate our pace of change much more quickly, because we were putting our time and energy and volunteer power and staff power, which you all knew was limited, into those places where we were going to have the most and greatest ability to make change, as opposed to diffusing it. And it was a hard lesson to learn. So just for a minute here, we'd love folks to just like write down, if you think about a campaign you're working on now maybe, or one you've worked on, answer your own 3 key questions. And if you type really fast and you want to put them into the chat box, we might be able to revisit and sort of look at these at the end. But we'd love to just have folks take a minute or so and write those down before we get into the Power Prism itself. All right, I'm going to trust that people have done this because I'm already looking at my clock. Why don't we go to the next slide, which actually gets us into the Power Prism. So this visual you see is probably the 3rd or 4th iteration that we've had of the Power Prism. There will probably be future ones at some point, and you are going to be getting ongoing training, technical assistance, coaching, and staff support from Voices for Healthy Kids on all of these 6 things over time, both if you're grantees right now or if you want to stay connected to Voices well into the future. These kind of trainings and technical assistance tools are intended to be free for you and for your organizations to use over time. So keep in touch with us. If you're not on our list, get on the list. Tell other friends to get on the list, because we really want to be able to provide much more in-depth support. And we also want to be able to have you, our grantees, and our partners who are expert in these areas also train and help us learn better ways of doing this. So there will be some parts of the series where you'll actually be hearing from other grantees who'll be presenting information. But the tool itself, the Prism itself, is fairly straightforward. If you've ever played with a prism and held it up to light and watched the light go through it and refract and get bigger, that's really what this Prism is intended to do for people who are doing advocacy work. So rather than thinking of our work in a linear fashion, this Prism allows us to really look at it and take our work and think, could we build more power for that thing we're trying to accomplish if we were to implement any or all of these 6 power tools? And I'll give you an example, a very sort of high level explanation of these power tools. We get often asked, like, do they have to go in a certain order? And they don't, except for the first one. Research and data collection always has to be the first power tool. We are called, I think, in the work that we do, that is social change work and healthy community work and all of that, to make sure that we are proposing changes in policy and legislation and systems that has some grounding in science, that we can actually use data to define the problem that we're trying to address, that can defend the solution we're trying to pursue, that has community voice in it. So maybe surveys of community members that say, this is actually important to us, we care about this, we think X should be done, this is how we experience it. And then there's this other kind of data than research that's also important. And that's really the sort of more political data, the intel, the, what's happening at your state capitol or your city hall or your town meeting or whatever decision-making body you're trying to influence. How are people getting along with each other? How are decisions really made? What's hot, what's not? How are you going to get this to move? And so there's a whole other set of research that we do that is really around pathways of influence. One, to understanding those key decision makers, and two, really trying to understand the historical context, particularly of race and power in a particular community, because as we work to advance racial justice and health equity through voices, we learned pretty quickly that doing that without having done some homework on the history of that community, literally back to indigenous times, is really doing a disservice to that community, but also to your campaign. And so one of the research things that we try to bring into our work when we're able to is also doing some of that research back on the community. Coalition building and maintenance is the next power tool, and many of you are leading coalitions. We saw from your campaign plans, or you've been members of coalitions. Coalitions, you might use a different word because sometimes that word is not popular in certain places. So you might call it a network or something else. The whole purpose of a coalition is to have enough people on your side that makes it easier for those decision makers to give you what you want. So it really is on our, it's a requirement on us in the advocacy community to make sure that we are coalescing and bringing together as many organizations, interest groups, community leaders, to support our point of view, so that that decision maker doesn't have to choose between 7 people who are offering, similar things, and they know that they're going to make 6 of them unhappy. They want to make 7 people happy. Our job is to make it easy for them to do that, which also means providing them political cover. There's nothing better for a state rep or a city councilor to be able to say to somebody that they're getting pressure from is, man, I'd love to take that vote for you, but they're killing me on this back home. My phone is blowing up. All these organizations that are important to my community really want this. I got to vote the other way. We need to provide political cover to our folks, and really coalitions can be an incredibly important way of doing that. Coalitions have also, in voices and a lot of the work we've been doing in, particularly in public health advocacy in the last 10 years or so, been one of the first places where we've been able to really bring together some community-based organizations, civil rights and social justice organizations with traditional public health organizations to really start to understand and develop a shared understanding of what it means to try to achieve health equity or try to advance health equity. There have been lots of too many examples, and I've been part of them, where we have had well-intentioned organizations doing for as opposed to doing with. The coalition table is a really nice way to right set that power dynamic. And so it's an incredibly important tool, both for winning, but also for the equity piece of it, which we value deeply. Fundraising and development we need it. Even if you're doing a coalition, if you're doing a campaign rather, even in a neighborhood level, you might need signs, you might need snacks, you might need a petition, you might need somebody to volunteer time to go to your local dump and collect signatures on something. It's not a big campaign, it's not a big budget, but there's requirements. Then we're talking about, when we move into legislative campaigns of any sort, there's a budget that needs to be in place to fund and pay for what you're trying to do. We tend to think about the fundraising and development power tool as one directional. It really goes in several directions. Smart advocacy organizations and smart advocates will look at their funders and financial supporters as potential advocates. And so, I work for the American Heart Association. We're very lucky to have lots of donors of all sorts of levels. We are really successful when we can get those donors who maybe didn't join because of an advocacy issue, maybe they joined because they had a family who's a stroke survivor, when we can migrate them over to become an advocate to support financially the advocacy work we're doing at the American Heart Association, their affinity for AHA grows, their work gets stronger, but we are also able to go directly to people who already care about the organization and ask them to be advocates. We also need to do a much better job of asking advocates to be financial supporters of our advocacy efforts. We are horrible at this in public health. We are probably the worst movement of in any sector. We don't raise money for political reasons, and I'm hoping that will change at some point. But fundraising and development is super critical. The next power tool is grassroots and key contacts. I'm just going to show you, Yui, if you could jump to the next slide. When we're thinking about grassroots and key contacts, we generally think about moving individuals along this sort of continuum. And grassroots folks for us are, and we're all grassroots folks, are defined by the relationship with people who represent them in decision-making bodies. So for me, it's from my town meeting member in Precinct J, where I live, all the way up to the President of the United States and a whole bunch of folks in between. I'm a grassroots constituent of theirs. Now, I'd love to tell you that all grassroots constituents are created equally. They're not. The more engaged a grassroots person is, the more influence they can potentially have on an individual key decision maker. So you'll notice in Voices and AHA and lots of your organizations, we try to engage people through that big net, the internet, online. You know, that's a good way to get people in, and we bring them in. That should not be the end of our grassroots work. We want to move them up. We want to be talking to and engaging voting constituents. Why? Well, voting constituents are the ones that those, you know, you go back to the answer to number 3, who's got the power to give you what you want. Those decision makers are going to be most influenced by their own voters. They're also looking at active voting constituents. So if you ever look at a voter file, you can tell how often people vote. Folks who vote in primary elections and local elections, they're like gold. If you're trying to cultivate grassroots people, you want to do a direct mail campaign or door-to-door campaign, those are the doors you want to knock on, because those are the people who are in play. Active voting constituents and donors are also important, and they don't have to be donors to that particular lawmaker, just somebody who maybe has put some of their own personal money into some political cause, and it could be $5. It doesn't matter how much it is, but it signals something different to those decision makers about that particular constituent. Then at the very top of the pyramid are people who personally know their decision maker. And these aren't necessarily big hoo-has. This could be somebody who babysat that state representative when she was a young child. It could be a next door neighbor. It could be somebody who dated, as long as they still get along. Doesn't really matter who it is. We know that it takes about 6 months if you want to actively build a relationship with bringing somebody from a grassroots to a grass tops key contact. You can really do it within about 6 months' time if you're planning it. We tested it out several years ago. It takes longer usually. What I really like about this particular piece here is it's also the place where young people under voting age and folks who are not here with legal documentation in this country have a lot of power with decision makers if they know them personally. So we try to do a lot of work engaging people up this ladder of engagement by getting them, you know, into rooms, into conversations, to like literally get to know people in the community who are representing them. Those people can get stuff done very, very fast and can provide really important information to our lobbyists, to our strategy. And our job in many ways is to create opportunities to get those people offline as quickly as we can and connect that high tech and high touch and build those relationships, because every lobbyist we work with, and many of you are them, what they want to do is be able to call somebody back at the office and say, I need 20 phone calls to go in, and who knows so-and-so, you know, who was at that farmer's market, can we get somebody to do this, X, Y, and Z. Thinking about this grassroots continuum is important. You, if you can flip back to or forward, and we'll round out with the next 2. Media advocacy is, it's sort of interesting. It's a blend of things like communications, marketing, public relations. But the difference is when we are doing media advocacy, there's really 2 reasons we want to do it. Number 1 is to answer that third key question, right? Think about who it is that has the power to give us what we want. Is our media effort, whether it's earned media, letters to the editor, or an editorial, or maybe an event or something like that, does it have the potential to influence that key decision maker? Don't be doing a statewide thing or something in western part of the state if the eastern part of the state is where your decision maker is. Thinking about media advocacy as a way of shifting around that thinking of that decision maker is important. Unlike public relations, it does not matter if your name or your organization's name is in that story. Sometimes getting your story covered in a way that is provocative or controversial, stay away from it, but let the reporter make that hard story exposing X is a really important way to use media advocacy to move things forward. And clearly in the last, I don't even know however many years, digital media advocacy, social media has become really important. And when we are bringing grassroots people to meet with lawmakers, usually we'll say, like, have them ask, what's your favorite source of news and information on health or whatever it is? And you will be shocked at the number that it'll say, oh, I follow this blog, or I'm friends with so-and-so on Facebook or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, first of all, okay, so that's great. I don't have to get something in the New York Times, but then I have to have a Facebook strategy or a strategy for influencing them. So it has to be the ones they're paying attention to. Media advocacy also should include your neighborhood media. Sometimes we forget about neighborhood and community media. Really important. Those radio shows, those drive radio shows that are happening in small little media markets in the neighborhoods are critically important, as well as non-English speaking media. As our demographics continue to shift in this country, we have lots of folks for whom English is not their primary language, but there are media outlets representing them and serving them. They're very often the same communities that we're trying to work with. Don't forget those media outlets as potential partners and places for getting our story across. And then finally is decision maker advocacy. So this is where lobbying comes in, which is usually what people think advocacy is. And I always like to save it for last, because lobbying is like a tiny little bit of advocacy and winning campaigns. Decision maker advocacy is really thinking about, again, the answer to the third key question, those handful of decision makers that have the ability to give you what you want, how do other decision makers in their sphere of influence have the ability to get them to think something? So sign-on letters, who you have co-sponsoring or sponsoring your legislation has a huge influence on those final ultimate decision makers. Caucuses, a lot of decision-making bodies have caucuses. They may have Black and Latino caucuses, they may have women's caucuses, they may have children's caucuses, they may have rural caucuses. Those sort of formulations of decision maker actually makes a lot of difference, and it can be super powerful, and it's part of that sort of complement of the 6 power tools that you want to pull through. And we also want to make sure, we'll probably mention this at the end, but when you look at those 6 things, there are volunteer roles that can be assigned to each of them. And so if your organization works with volunteers, let us know. We've got job descriptions written for volunteers in each of these areas that we would be very, very happy to share with you if you are interested. And I am going to pass this over to Rena now.
Yeah, so I just wanted to provide a few examples, Yui, if you can move forward in the slides, about where and how to use the Prism, right? So I think, as Lori talked about, thinking about advocacy plans and policy change, I think, right, when we see all of those components, I think that's probably where a lot of us are very comfortable. It's where a lot of us are spending our time as we're thinking about public health and social change that we're trying to make. But I guess we also wanted to make sure that we highlighted that it's a tool that we can use in all corners of our work, from program planning to writing grant proposals to, as you're thinking about your coalition or your network, depending on what you want to call it, even meeting agendas to make sure you're getting out of them what you want, trainings, and even evaluation. And I think the reason that we wanted to make sure we just highlighted this, that it's not just for when you're sitting there with your coalition or your campaign team and talking about, okay, what do we have to do in these areas, is that this really also helps you ingrain it in your day-to-day work and really helps leverage your power and build power for the long term. And so and then the other piece is asking those key questions, even if it's not just the Prism, asking the 3 questions for each of these things too, will just really help you stay focused and drive things forward. So now we're going to talk a little bit about a couple examples. We're going to talk a little bit about how we use it at Voices, even as we think about our structure, and then we will go back to a couple advocacy examples. So Yui, can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So here is the areas of the Power Prism, and this is actually the Voices senior team. This is what we look like. So when we reviewed our structure last year, we were asking those 3 questions, and we were thinking about what, if anything, did we need to change as we looked at our team and what we wanted to accomplish. And as you think about, for us, our senior team is set up, right, to drive strategy, and it should really represent a scalable campaign infrastructure. So our senior team actually brings all of the power tools together to help drive our strategy. And so and then you'll see in a minute, we're actually going to dive into our policy research team, so you can actually see then where we also overlap. So to be clear, even though we have a research team and we have a grassroots and media team, we don't live in isolation. So once you go into our teams, we then reapply the Prism, and you can see how we touch each of the categories. And Lori's going to talk about that, and we're looking at our policy and research team as our next example, just to drive that home a little bit.
That's great, thank you. So there's a lot of words on this next slide, so bear with me. When we were doing, we've done staff training on the Power Prism, and there's always this point where folks are like, well, I don't see how my work connects to anybody else's work. And what the whole point of the Power Prism is that it's all integrated. I don't know if anybody ever read the children's book, Harold and the Purple Crayon, where he'd write all over and connect all these things. That's what I think about when I think about the Power Prism. We're always connecting the dots. So our research and policy team literally cuts across all 6 areas, but it took a little bit to think about that. So certainly for the research and data, that's kind of obvious because that's what they do, but they're coming up with the science, identifying equity impacts, developing policy bottom lines, working with other researchers in the field, developing, sort of what are the questions we need to answer. For coalitions, they lead a Voices research network. They represent us with science. They are working with and recruiting and engaging more practitioners of color to influence our work, as well as finding community voices and surveys to make sure that what we're coming up with at this level in this place is also not making decisions in the absence of what the community's intentions, decisions, priorities, and solutions are for something. For fundraising and development, they certainly are that team can help us sell it. Like the data helps us sell things to potential funders, right? They can help us develop the ROI. They can also obviously do research on external leads. For grassroots, leading some of that participatory action research, focus groups, interpreting surveys, doing science reviews for our grantees and things like that can be particularly helpful. For media advocacy, and you probably see a couple examples, like those scientists that are sitting there looking at spreadsheets all the day come up with some things that turn into the sexiest, most interesting things that can be converted into advocacy power. And if it's founded in science, the right members of the rest of the team can help convert that into, pressure levers to influence those decision makers. And then finally, our research and policy folks and those we work with locally, they can put together the facts. They can help make that case and localize what your campaign is about. They can also be incredible people to testify when you've got a hearing. They've got credibility. They can take those reporter phone calls, talk to lawmakers. So research and policy may seem like it's an island unto itself sometime. It may be pure and it doesn't want to muck around with the rest of us. We cut them across everything. And each of these power tool areas and the staff assigned to them cut across all of these. And our team is getting really used to now hearing when there's a question about something, did you run it through the Power Prism? Did you run it through whatever it is, run it through the Power Prism? I want to know how it cuts across all of these things, not just working in isolation. And that has become a particularly helpful way to think about things. So I'm going to show you, you're going to see 2 ugly slides now. We'll start with the first one, but I think this will help explain the comprehensive nature of the Power Prism and how it might be different than some other advocacy framework. So what you're looking at here is sort of old school. There's nothing wrong with this. Issuing a press release is important, right? It's a part of media advocacy. We should be doing it. We need to get the word out. So one of the ways we traditionally might do something like this is, draft that press release and you've got a quote from the coalition director. You line up some speakers and make sure that you've got content experts and a lawmaker, and you're doing all these things that sort of still all fit in media advocacy. Then when you're pushing this out, you're going to distribute it, the press release, you're going to call the media to do follow-up, you're going to respond to press inquiries, and maybe put some interviews together with interested reporters. And then finally, when you get to the produce phase, the media either covers your story or it doesn't, right? That's media advocacy. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with it or challenging for organizations like ours and yours is we have to do a lot more with a lot less. And so if you can show the next slide, I'm going to show you how this might look through the Power Prism and how we're thinking through things. So same press release, same event, but stopping and taking a little bit more time and thinking about building more power from this one press release. That is our event that we're going to build power from. Thinking about did we have community groups survey for local opinions about the way, this is around a beverage tax example. Have they talked to people in the community and put together a survey about how folks would like to see that money spent? So that's research and data and grassroots. Was the quotes and the speaker, sort of the voices of this issue, not just the coalition director, but did we get community members? Did we get a lawmaker or a decision maker who has influence with your target? So that brings in some other power tools. Did we distribute it to the media outlets followed by our key decision makers? So have we done our homework? Is decision maker advocacy, it's media advocacy. Is there a personal story there that relates to highlighting the health impact of sugary drinks? So did we tap into our grassroots folks for more media advocacy? going through this, I'll read this, but you'll see, when we're pushing it out, how we're alerting, our grassroots and grasstops advocates, letting them know that this is happening in advance so that they can be ready and on point and on message when they want to talk about this, letting engaged community members, partners, coalition members have stuff in advance so that they can post it on their website. They can become like amplifying messengers on all of this. Making it easy for others to participate in this is critically important. Giving people content that they can push out through their own social media. There's a lot of things that go in here that, because like you can put out a press release today and it doesn't get covered at all, but if you're doing all these things that you see in this push phase, it looks like you are fabulously successful, because you're going to have content that exists that you didn't have to spend a lot of money on, that you can share with your donors, you can share with lawmakers, you can continue to just push out and exploit and take advantage of, even though it maybe never actually ran in a print publication of a particular newspaper. Then finally, if you're lucky and a story does run, there's an opportunity for a follow-up letter to the editor, possibly an editorial board meeting, thank you notes to those reporters or those outlets. So all of a sudden you can get, there's a grasstops input there. There's more media advocacy, making sure that once you've done something and something is published or a story runs, getting that right out to your grassroots folks, your grasstops folks, your coalition people, your would-be and wanna-be funders and prospective funders, so they know that you're in play. Like, there's a noise thing that needs to go along with this. So there's more grassroots and fundraising and media advocacy that comes from this type of thing. And I've got somebody's note just popped up over my thing here, so I can't see. Promoting the story through, thank you, Facebook and live tweets and all of those types of things. So using social media to just keep pushing it out more, and then requesting a meeting with decision makers. So let's say, hey, the story ran, and what we would do, and when I was doing this work in Massachusetts, we burned through more fluorescent paper, copying these stories and handing them out to each of the 200 lawmakers' offices. It sounds so boring and old school, but it also gives you an opportunity to talk to people. And if you're in a place where it's small enough and you can do that, do it. Ask for that meeting. Hey, did you see this story? We'd love to come talk to you about it. We'd love to hear what you think about it. So the difference in the Power Prism is and it's literally about stopping and thinking, could we get more juice from this if we were to also implement any of those other power tools? And talking to people who have that expertise. And somebody jumped in with a question, how do you do this when you're a campaign of one? We can come back to that, certainly, because a lot of you are new grantees in particular from really small organizations. You can, but you need volunteers. Ideally are working in coalition and have other organizations that can own pieces of this. I have never known anybody who's awesome at all 6 of these power tools. And most of us have our favorites and we default back to them. If I'm working on a coalition campaign, you will see me like creeping back to grassroots like a magnet, because that's my favorite thing, and avoiding fundraising and development. We all have our passions and our preferences. So I love that you asked the question. Our goal as campaigners is to find individuals or organizations with strengths in those areas where we don't have strengths, and building your campaign team and your campaign plan around those 6 proficiencies will it will greatly increase your likelihood of success. And it becomes habit strangely quickly. And we've got a whole bunch of things that you can download and stick on your wall to remind yourself, but there are literally times, probably several times a week still, that I'll be stuck on something and I'm like, ooh, let's run it through the Power Prism. And it sounds goofy, and my family now makes fun of me because they're running everything through the Power Prism too, but it works. And I think what I have found that I like about it is it should be easy, right? This should be accessible. Advocacy shouldn't be a nightmare. It shouldn't be hard. You shouldn't have to have a degree from the Kennedy School to be able to be a good advocate at all. We should make advocacy something that our community members, our young people, our retirees, our new arrivals can plug into and contribute to and be a part of on day one. And so that's what I've liked about the Power Prism, is it's real. It's pretty easy. It's really a matter of remembering things and then bringing in those assets, those talents of other people to help you do this well. Somebody just asked if these are available to print. Yes, there's more stuff on the Power Prism than you'll know what to do with, and we will make sure we get it out and also post things. But really just want to make sure that folks really see what this could look like. And there's we're kind of short on time, Rena, so I don't know if we want to give one example of
Yeah,
the,
do you want to do one example? And then
yeah,
if folks have questions, now would be the time to put them in the chat box. So when Lori finishes, we
yeah.
can get right to those. And we'll be quick, but so we'll
So
make sure we get
Yui,
to
if
some
you could
questions.
go to, yeah, thank you. Many of you have seen this type of data that's come out. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and others have used it. And it really is where you show a city, a town, whatever, and it's the difference in life expectancy between zip codes. So what started with like probably super, I don't want to say boring, but dry data that was probably collected over years and really got down to the zip +4 level was taken, and I think somebody ran it through the Power Prism, right? They did all this data. Now somebody figured out some data that I would have done is what lawmakers represent those particular zip codes, right? I want to know because I want to go and talk to, Representative Singh differently than I'm going to talk to Representative Samitis, and I want to be able to see where they fall on this. I want to let the media know that this is like real, and there's an element of media advocacy that to be successful, you want to have a surprising element. This is surprising. Every time I see one of these, it doesn't matter what part of the country, and I look and my mouth always drops like, how can that be? Well, if we're having that reaction as people who do this work, imagine what a normal person who isn't looking at this all the time, their reaction to it. That's a successful media advocacy hook using this. Getting a little graphic like this out through social media to the grassroots members who can do something with it, with the ability for them to maybe push a message to their own lawmakers, to their own decision makers, to different community groups in their community, to others to say, we can do better than this is really important. Using this to motivate decision makers, depending on where you fall in that, is critical because they make decisions about funding. They will, like all the rest of us, have an emotional reaction to seeing this. Some of them may be embarrassed. Some of them may be angry. Some of them may be ashamed. Some of them might feel like motivated to do something. This graphic here, which seems like one little thing, it's like one of the perfect Power Prism examples because you can literally use it for everything. You could have a 10-year, hopefully it wouldn't be 10, let's say a 2-year campaign in Minneapolis, St. Paul, just built around this. If you wanted to take it and really squeeze as much out of it as you could to make your case for change around health in those areas where you have lower life expectancy, you could milk this for a very, very long time. And that's what the Power Prism reminds us to do. And you can build power as you're doing it. So we are going to wrap this up here. You can skip the bathtub. And Rena, how about if you want me to toss it back to you?
Yeah, I think Annie, if you have questions, things that have come up in the chat box while we've been talking that we've missed. And then I also make a plug. Annie also put in there our evaluation. So if folks can copy that and fill that out too, that'd be great.
We did. We had a question earlier from Maddie around the grassroots and key contacts. It says, by donor, do you specifically mean donors to elected officials? And if so, how do we account for power of grassroots pressure from those who are low income and cannot afford to give money to political figures?
Great question. Yes, it is referring to political donors. The donation does not need to be large, but the reason it's a political donor is many elected officials, there's very few states that have bad campaign finance accounting right now. So most places, and some of you are probably from those places that I would insult, so I'm not going to say them, but most places you can literally go into a website right now, plug in somebody's name, whether it's a lawmaker or a donor, and find out, who their donors are. If they're an elected official, then what they spend their money on. And if it's a regular person, plug in their name and see if they've given money before. So those files, those donor files, have different meaning to that decision maker than other things do. So it's like one more kind of like check, right? Literally. For folks who don't have money, and there's a lot of folks who don't have money or would never been asked, quite frankly, to give money to an elected, sometimes having events like community events, community conversations that are with, lower income members of the community or a mixed group, inviting, like if you're going to some, fancy fundraiser for a lawmaker, don't exclude people just because they can't give, invite them, but let the lawmaker know, look, not everyone here's got money to give, but they've got something to give. They have influence, they have votes, they have friends, they have neighbors, they have interest, you represent them. So I would just find different ways of doing it, but like literally from a data point of view, we know who those donors are because by law it has to be reported. So sometimes if you have to be targeting a particular segment of folks to get them engaged to influence a particular lawmaker, their donor file is a really good place to go.
Thanks, Lori. We also got another question that asked, can you give an idea how to weave the principles of the Power Prism and the Midwest Academy strategy chart? I see common themes that are present in both tools.
Yes, it's a lot shorter, the Power Prism. I think that's probably what I could say. I think the foundations are really similar. I have not done the direct action organizing chart for the Midwest Academy for a long time, so I'm probably missing pieces of it, partly because I wanted to simplify things. I think they're both amazing. I mean, I know some of the best advocates I know have been trained in Midwest Academy, so I think the world of it. For me, this has just been an easier way of doing things. We've got people who are on this call, many who've been trained in both and use things interchangeably. My preference for the Power Prism is because I helped co-create it and we change it all the time. So we tailor it to different things. My understanding is, at least for a while, Midwest Academy was, probably because it was so good and the gold standard, wasn't really adapting and changing as much. I don't know if that's the case anymore. I think I would use both, and there may be others out there that I don't know. I think it's terrific. And we do have some, oh my gosh, it was probably from the first or second year of Voices, there is a PowerPoint that really shows both of them woven together that I'm sure I could find if somebody wanted to see it. So when you're going through the campaign plan for the Power Prism, it's like, looks like this for Midwest Academy. So we did integrate it at some point. I'm sure I can dig it out if folks are interested.
Thanks. I think we've got one more, time for one more question here. Let's see, Katie asks, if we have advocates in areas that are not targeted areas for a campaign, but they still want to be involved, how do we support them to do so while still fitting within the Power Prism dynamic? Example is a statewide sugary beverage campaign, but advocate lives in a very safe district.
Love it. So this is what I would have done differently in Western Mass years ago. If you have advocates who are interested, there's, again, I would say run it through the Power Prism, right? Look at those other 5 power tools and are there things that they might be able to help with? So are there things that they could do in the media that would help, whether it's social media, building, sort of a list of building a buzz around something can be super helpful. Getting coalition like organizations and it can be from their district to join a coalition. There's no lawmaker who's going to look at a list and be like, oh, there's too many names on that. They actually like seeing that there's other parts of the state or city or whatever represented. Getting their supportive lawmaker to be more emboldened to sort of stand out. Now your lawmaker might be the sponsor and he or she maybe they're all like all over this and they don't need you propping them up or whatever, but lots of times we have sort of the other sort of rank and file supporters who may be co-sponsors. Find ways that make it easy for them to also provide political cover to their whoever those decision makers are. So that's where the sign-on letters, the those little briefings help. So maybe they're convening a briefing that they're inviting their key decision makers to. How can they sort of leverage their supportive power to put pressure on those decision makers? All of those things can be really helpful. That you might be able to get local funders who, if you're in a district that really wants a beverage tax and it's like super progressive and they're excited, there might be some local funders or companies or volunteers from some of your organizations that are like-minded that might say, wow, this is really important. We're not going to win this without X getting on board. How about if we raise some money to move some of the strategies over in her district, because that's the only way we're going to get what we want. So I would say run it through the Power Prism. There's no advocate that we don't need, but the jobs we might assign to them and sort of the urgency, particularly around recruiting and sort of how we're deploying those talents, differ based on that key decision maker. Really appreciate that question.
Great. We are at time, we're a little over, so we apologize for that. But thank you so much, Lori and Rena, for this great presentation and first in our advocacy training series. I mentioned next up is some digital advocacy strategy and tools. So please watch for an email to sign up for those late July and then early August. And we also plopped the link for the evaluation. We really would love your feedback. So please feel free to fill that out. And thanks for the great participation in the chat function today, everybody. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Annie.
Bye.